Our weather is an interconnected system. Small changes in one place create surprising results in others. Powerful storms, widespread fires, rising waters, collapsing glaciers. The race is on to understand the impact. Travel alongside researchers and scientists as they search for answers, and join with real-life heroes as they battle the elements. National Geographic invites you to explore our amazing planet as its most powerful forces collide. Extreme weather.
Good day, everyone! Welcome to our video lecture today entitled Climate Change and the Energy Crisis, a video lecture on the subject GEC STS. And this presentation is brought to you by yours truly, Kathleen Ann Perez. In this video lecture, you are expected to define what is climate change and energy crisis, identify the factors affecting energy crisis, and develop sense of responsibility of the environment. But before we dig deeper into the vast effects of climate change, let us define first what is really a climate change.
Climate change is the long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. Such shifts can be natural due to changes in the sun's activity or large volcanic eruptions. That is according to United Nations Organization. It has been said that it is a long-term alteration in Earth's climate and weather patterns, and it took nearly a century of research and data to convince the vast majority of the scientific community that human activity could alter the climate of our entire planet. Now, for a better understanding, let's dig deeper into the history of climate change, and let's question ourselves, when does this climate change start? It has been said that climate change starts when people believe that rain follows the flow. When ancient Greeks thought that humans could change temperatures and influence rainfall by chopping down trees, plowing fields, or irrigating a desert, not until one theory of climate effects appeared in 1930, which is named the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl was a period of severe dust storms that greatly damaged the ecology and agriculture of the American and Canadian people during the 1930s. And by 1820, the greenhouse effect phrase was coined. It has been defined as the way that heat is trapped close to Earth's surface by greenhouse gases. These heat-trapping gases can be thought of as a blanket wrapped around the Earth, keeping the planet toastier than it would be without them. In the 1820s, French mathematician and physicist Joseph Fourier proposed that energy reaching the planet as sunlight must be balanced by energy returning to space, since heated surfaces emit radiation. But some of that energy, he reasoned, must be held within the atmosphere and should not return to space, keeping the Earth warm. He proposed that Earth's thin covering of air, which is called the atmosphere, acts as the way as a glass greenhouse would. Energy enters through the glass walls, but it is then trapped inside, much like a warm greenhouse. And by 1970, there was a commotion happened. It is called the 1970s scare. This was due to the sudden cooling of the Earth. A different kind of climate were it to called global cooling. As more people become concerned about pollutants people were emitting into the atmosphere, some scientists theorized that pollution could block sunlight and cool Earth. In fact, Earth did cool somewhat between 1940 to 1970 due to a post-war boom in aerosol pollutants which reflected sunlight away from the planet. And the idea that sunlight blocking pollutants could chill Earth caught on in the media, as in, in 1974 Time magazine article titled Another Ice Age. But as the brief cooling period ended and temperatures resumed their upward climb, warnings by a minority of scientists that Earth was cooling were dropped. Part of the reasoning was that, while smog could remain suspended in the air for weeks, CO2 or carbon dioxide could persist in the atmosphere for centuries. In 1988, global warming gets real. The early 1980s would mark a sharp increase in global temperatures. Many experts point 1988 as a critical turning point when watershed events placed global warming in the spotlight. Scientists sounding the alarm about climate change began to see the media and the public paying closer attention. NASA scientist James Hansen delivered testimony and presented models to Congress in United States in June of 1988, saying he was 99% sure that global warming was upon us. And in 1989, IPCC was established under the United Nations. As global warming gained currency as a real phenomenon, researchers dug into the possible ramifications of a warming climate. Among the predictions were warnings of severe heat waves, droughts, and more powerful hurricanes fueled by rising sea surface temperatures. Other studies predicted that as massive glaciers at the poles melt, sea levels could rise between 11 and 38 inches by 21,000, enough to swamp many of the cities along the east coast of the United States. Thus, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, was established during that year under the United Nations to provide a scientific view of climate change and its political and economic impacts. In 1997, government leaders began discussions to try and stem the outflow of greenhouse gas emissions to prevent the most dire predicted outcomes. The first global agreement to reduce greenhouse gases is the Kyoto Protocol that was adopted in 1997. The protocol, which was signed by President Bill Clinton, called for reducing the emission of 6 greenhouse gases in 41 countries plus the European Union to 5.2% below 1990 levels during the target period of 2008 to 2012. In March 2001, shortly after taking office, President George Bush announced that United States would not implement the Kyoto Protocol anymore, saying that the protocol was fatally flawed in fundamental ways, and that citing concerns that the deal would hurt the U.S. economy. And in 2018, Swedish teenager and climate activist Greta Thunberg began protesting in front of Swedish parliament with a sign, "School Strike for Climate." Her protest to raise awareness for global warming caught the world by storm, and by November 2018, over 17,000 students in 24 countries were participating in the climate strikes. In her September 2019 appearance at the UN, she told the world leaders that, "You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?" And in the same year, the UN Climate Action Summit reinforced that 1.5 degrees Celsius is the socially, economically, politically, and scientifically safe limit to global warming by the end of this century, and set a deadline for achieving net zero emissions to 2050. Now, how really dangerous is climate change? Since the 1800s, human activities have been the main driver of climate change, primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. Burning fossil fuels generates greenhouse gas emissions that act like a blanket wrap around the Earth, trapping the sun's heat and raising temperatures. Climate scientists have shown that humans are responsible for virtually all global heating over the last 200 years. Human activities like the ones mentioned above are causing greenhouse gases that are warming the world faster than at any time in at least the last 2,000 years. The average temperature of the Earth's surface is now about 1.1 degrees Celsius warmer than it was in the late 1800s. The last decade, which is the 2011 to 2020, was the warmest on record, and each of the last 4 decades has been warmer than any previous decade since 1850. And many people think that climate change mainly means warmer temperatures, but the temperature rise is only the beginning of the story, because the Earth is a system where everything is connected. Changes in one area can influence changes in all others. Hence, climate change can extinct human lives. The consequences of climate change now include, among others, intense droughts, water scarcity, severe fires, rising sea levels, flooding, melting polar ice, catastrophic storms, and declining biodiversity. And among these consequences is the energy crisis. Now, what is an energy crisis? Energy crisis is defined as the concern that the world's demands on the limited natural resources that are used to power industrial society are diminishing as the demand rises. These natural resources are in limited supply. While they do occur naturally, it can take hundreds of thousands of years to replenish the stores. Now, here are the various causes of the global energy crisis. First, overconsumption. The energy crisis is a result of many different strains in our natural resources, not just one. There is a strain on fossil fuels such as oil, gas, and coal due to overconsumption, which then in turn can put a strain on our water and oxygen resources by causing pollution. Second is the overpopulation. Another cause of the crisis has been a steady increase in the world's population and its demand for fuel and products. No matter what type of food or products you choose to use, from fair trade and organic to those made from petroleum products in a sweatshop, not one of them is made or transported without a significant drain on our energy resources. Third, poor infrastructure. Aging infrastructure of power generating equipment is yet another reason for energy shortage. Most of the energy producing firms keep on using outdated equipment that restricts the production of energy. It is the responsibility of utilities to keep on upgrading the infrastructure and set a high standard of performance. Fourth, unexplored renewable energy options. Renewable energy still remains unused in most of the countries. Most of the energy comes from non-renewable sources like coal. It therefore remains the top choice to produce energy. Unless we give renewable energy a serious thought, the problem of energy crisis cannot be solved. Renewable energy sources can reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and also helps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Fifth, delay in commissioning of power plants. In a few countries, there is a significant delay in the commissioning of new power plants that can fill the gap between demand and supply of energy. The result is that old plants come under huge stress to meet the daily demand for power. When supply doesn't match demand, it results in load shedding and breakdown. Sixth is the wastage of energy. In most parts of the world, people do not realize the importance of conserving energy. Simple things like switching off fans and lights when not in use, using maximum daylight, walking instead of driving for short distances, using CFL instead of traditional bulbs, proper insulation for leakage of energy can go a long way in saving the energy. Seventh, poor distribution system. Eighth, major accidents and natural calamities. Yes, major accidents like pipeline bursts and natural calamities like the eruption of volcanoes, floods, earthquakes can also cause interruptions to energy supplies. The huge gap between supply and demand for energy can raise the price of essential items, which can give rise to inflation rate. Ninth, wars and attacks. Wars between countries can also hamper the supply of energy, especially if it happens in the Middle East countries like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, UAE, or Qatar. Also, the very recent Ukraine and Russia, where even here in the Philippines, we have felt the effect of the war through the rise of fuel prices. And the last one is the miscellaneous factors, such as tax hikes, strikes, military coup. Political events, severe hot summers, or cold winters can cause a sudden increase in demand for energy and can choke supply. The growth of human civilization has led to an increase in the consumption of traditional sources of energy, and a very basic source of energy is precious fossil fuels. And the usage of all these sources is bound to produce certain effects. And some important effects of the global energy crisis are as follows. First, environmental effects. Energy is produced by the burning of non-renewable fossil fuels. This does not only affect the global resources of fossil fuels, but it also affects the environment. The burning of fossil fuels releases greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and others. And these gases create a blanket on the Earth's surface which prevents the release of the short rays of the sun by night. Thus, the energy crisis facilitates making the Earth a warmer place by promoting global warming. Second, increasing prices of the fuel resources. As the use of fossil fuels increases, the cost of these resources increases too. We must remember, everyone, that the quantity in which these fossil fuels are available is limited. As we keep on using these resources, the amount of these fossil fuels further decreases. And with every passing day, the demand for these fuels increases daily while their available quantity decreases every day. This leads to an immense increase in the price of fossil fuels, causing the price to increase day in and day out. This creates a huge economic disturbance across the globe. Third, political disturbances. The fact that the energy crisis creates some socioeconomic disturbances also tells us that this global energy crisis also creates a lot of political disturbances across the globe. The quest for fossil fuels is one of the major causes of the same. Besides, with the failure of the energy markets, we see a crash not only in the global economy but also a crash of the energy available. All these are enough to give rise to the various socio-political disturbances. Fourth, the effect on the tourism industry. The tourism industry is largely dependent on the rise and fall of fuel prices. The tremendous rise of the fuel prices that comes as a result of the energy crisis affects the tourism industry pretty adversely. With the increase in fuel prices, there is an increase in the cost of tourism as well. As a result of this, there are many who cannot afford the same, and as a result of all of these, it is the tourism industry that suffers the most. Nevertheless, what can we do as a whole of humanity? It is to support the green transition. What is a green transition? Green transition, it is a shift towards economically sustainable growth and an economy that is not based on fossil fuels and overconsumption of natural resources. A sustainable economy relies on low-carbon solutions that promote the circular economy and biodiversity. Its objectives is to ensure that the key industries for the development of humankind pair their economic activity with greater environmental awareness. The green transition is a time needed to implement the changes that will lead societies to achieve a sustainable way of life and so that human activity no longer endangers the planet. The important thing, or at least the most noteworthy, will be to determine precisely what strategies and actions should be conducted during the period considered as the limit in order not to reach a point of no return. One of the latest reports issued by UN or IPCC made it clear that life in 21,000 will be greatly altered if society does not change its relationship with the environment. Climate change is already a visible reality in many parts of the world. It is resulting in severe weather events and impoverished living conditions for millions of people. Preventing such a situation from escalating and becoming completely irreversible is one of the commitments of today's society. To this end, it is very essential to implement plans to limit pollutant emissions and completely change the current way humans relate to the environment. This is the context in which all possible tools must be sought to ensure that the green transition comes in time to reverse a lifestyle that is unsustainable in the long term and adopt one that ensures that human activity does not jeopardize its own future. Thus, we should promote green transition. Because remember, nature's first, green is gold. That's all everyone, and thank you for listening.